There were 724 dwellings or camps among the Wyomings, located within an area of about 15 square miles. The total population was 8,688, every man, woman, and child, whether member or exchange, being listed. The plants were widely scattered through the territory also. Nowhere was anything like congestion permitted. So far as possible, families and individuals were assigned to living quarters not too far from the plants or offices in which their work lay. All able bodied men and women alternated in 2 week periods between military and industrial service, except those who were needed for household work. Since working conditions in the plants and the offices were ideal and everybody thus had plenty of healthy outdoor activity in addition, the population was sturdy and active. Laziness was regarded as nearly the greatest of social offenses. Hard work and general merit were variously rewarded with extra privileges, advancement to positions of authority, and with various items of personal equipment for convenience and luxury. In leisure moments, I got to I got great enjoyment from sitting outside the dwelling in which I was quartered with Bill Hearn and 10 other men, watching the occasional passers-by as with leisurely but swift movements they swung up and down the forest trail, rising from the ground in long, almost horizontal leaps, occasionally swinging from one convenient branch overhead to another before sliding back to the ground farther on. Normal traveling pace, where these trails were straight enough, was about 20 miles an hour. Such things as automobiles and railroad trains, the memory of them, not more than a month old in my mind, seemed inexpressibly silly and futile compared with such convenience as these belts or jumpers offered. Bill suggested that I wander around for several days, from plant to plant, to observe and study what I could. The entire community had been apprised of my coming, my raiding as an exchange reaching every building and post in the community by means of ultronic broadcast. Everywhere I was welcomed in an interested and helpful spirit. I visited plants where ultronic vibrations were isolated from the ether and through slow processes built up into subelectronic, electronic, and atomic forms into the two great synthetic elements, ultron and inertron. I learned something, superficially at least, of the processes of combined chemical and mechanical action through which were produced the various forms of synthetic cloth. I watched the manufacture of the machines which were used at locations of construction to produce the various forms of building materials. But I was particularly interested in the munitions plants and the rocket ship shops. Ultron is a solid of great molecular density and moderate elasticity, which has the property of being 100% conductive to those pulsations known as light, electricity, and heat. Since it is completely permeable to light vibrations, it is therefore absolutely invisible and non-reflective. Its magnetic response is almost, but not quite, 100% also. It is therefore very heavy under normal conditions, but extremely responsive to the repeller or anti-gravity rays such as the Hans use as legs for their airships. Inertron is the second great triumph of American research and experimentation with ultronic forces. It was developed just a few years before my awakening in the abandoned mine. It is a synthetic element built up through a complicated heterodyning of ultrasonic pulsations from infra-balanced subionic forms. It is completely inert to both electric and magnetic forces in all the orders above the ultronic, that is to say, the sub-electronic, the electronic, the atomic, and the molecular. In consequence, it has a number of amazing and valuable properties. One of these is the total lack of weight. Another is a total lack of heat. It has no molecular vibration whatever. It reflects 100% of the heat and light impinging upon it. It does not feel cold to the touch, of course, since it will not absorb the heat of the hand. It is a solid, very dense in molecular structure despite its lack of weight. Of great strength and considerable elasticity, it is a perfect shield against the disintegrator rays. Rocket guns are very simple contrivances so far as the mechanism of launching the bullet is concerned. They are simple, light tubes, closed at the rear end with a trigger actuated pin for piercing the thin skin of the base of the cartridge. This piercing of the skin starts the chemical and atomic reaction. The entire cartridge leaves the tube under its own power at a very easy initial velocity, just enough to ensure accuracy of aim, so the tube does not have to be of heavy construction. The bullet increases in velocity as it goes. It may be solid or explosive. It may explode on contact or on time, or a combination of these two. Bill and I talked mostly of weapons, military tactics, and strategy. Strangely enough, he had no idea whatever of the possibilities of the barrage, though the tremendous effect of a curtain of fire with such high explosive projectiles as these modern rocket guns used was obvious to me. But the barrage idea, it seemed, has been lost track of completely in the air wars that followed the First World War and in the peculiar guerrilla tactics developed by Americans in the later period of operations from the ground against Han airships and in the gang wars, which until a few generations ago I learned had been almost continuous. "I wonder," said Bill one day, "if we couldn't work up some form of barrage to spring on the Bad Bloods. The big boss told me today that he's been in communication with the other gangs, and all are agreed that the Bad Bloods might as well be wiped out for good. That attempt on Wilma Daring's life and their evident desire to make trouble among the gangs has stirred up every community east of the Alleghanies. The boss says that none of the others will object if we go after them. So I imagine that before long we will. Now show me again how you worked that business in the Argonne forest. The conditions ought to be pretty much the same." I went over it with him in detail, and gradually we worked out a modified plan that would be better adapted to our more powerful weapons and use of jumpers. "It will be easy," Bill exulted. "I'll slide down and talk it over with the boss tomorrow." During the first 2 weeks of my stay with the Wyomings, Wilma Deering and I saw a great deal of each other. I naturally felt a little closer friendship for her in the view of the fact that she was the first human being I saw after waking from my long sleep. Her appreciation of my saving her life, though, I could not have done otherwise than I did in that matter. And most of all, my own appreciation of the fact that she had not found it as difficult as the others to believe my story operated in the same direction. I could easily imagine my story must have sounded incredible. It was natural enough, too, that she should feel an unusual interest in me. In the first place, I was her personal discovery. In the second, she was a girl of studious and reflective turn of mind. She never got tired of my stories and descriptions of the 20th century. The others of the community, however, seemed to find our friendship a bit amusing. It seemed that Wilma had a reputation for being cold toward the opposite sex, and so others, not being able to appreciate some of her fine qualities as I did, misinterpreted her attitude, much to their own delight. Wilma and I, however, ignored this as much as we could.